That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Substance, the sophomore film directed by Coralie Fargeat, which premiered at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival in competition where it won the Best Screenplay Prize. It is being distributed by Mubi and will be released September 20th, 2024. I think just days after it also plays at Midnight Madness at TIFF in Toronto.
Nice. The director.
Mhm.
What do we know from them?
Her previous film was Revenge in 2017, starring Matilda Lutz, which I believe was distributed by Neon, which is quite good. Also, kind of a well done B movie.
What is The Substance about? A fading celebrity decides to use a black market drug, a cell replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. What is your pull quote?
A vicious, satirical slice of body horror, Demi Moore has never been better in this moral fable where woman is revealed to be her own worst enemy.
Mine. Moore and Qualley shine in this fantastically absurd, sobering, and grotesque commentary on growing old gracefully. I thought this movie was excellent. It's very weird. Body horror is a good way to describe it. If I had, I felt it feels like if you mix like Terrifier with Maxine and Carrie and throw in some Death Becomes Her.
Oh, Death Becomes Her, definitely. But I also, God, anything by Frank Henenlotter, who did the
Oh,
Basket Case films, Brian Usna Society, Sunset Boulevard, Requiem for a Dream. All of those were things that crossed my mind. Even I was going to bring this up later, but Multiplicity, which Margaret Qualley's mother, Andy McDowell, starred in.
hmm. Well, the story's kind of simple. Demi Moore plays a character named Elisabeth Sparkle. She's a fitness celebrity, and we see her.
Slash Oscar winner.
I was a little confused by because we see that she has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but we really
Mhm.
only focus on her being like a Suzanne Summers type, Susan
Well,
Powell.
to me, that read like Cher, the Oscar winner who in the 90s started doing fitness
Oh,
videos.
sure. Yeah. Or like a Jane Fonda type.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so Demi Moore, we see her filming her show on her 50th birthday. And after she's done taping, she meets with a network executive played by Dennis Quaid. And he tells her, women in your position at the age of 50, it's over. So you're fired. Good luck to you. The end. So Demi, of course, is upset. She's leaving the office or studio and gets into a bad car accident. She goes to the hospital. Thankfully, she's not injured. But while she's there, she meets a very peculiar nurse, a young man, and he slips her an external hard drive. So when she gets home, she views the file on that hard drive, and it's an advertisement for something called the substance, which is basically saying that you can take this substance and create like a younger, perfect version of yourself. But the catch is that you can only be that other version for 7 days. So you're alternating 7 days on, 7 days off. No exceptions. Demi says she wants it. She goes through the process of getting it. She takes it, and out pops Margaret Qualley, this younger, more perfect version of her. And Margaret's agenda is to get Demi's old job back.
She doesn't just pop out. She kind of tears herself through Demi's back.
Oh, we need to talk about all of that. Yeah.
Anyway, but
I,
go
I
ahead.
I actually want to go through all the body horror, grotesque stuff. So we're going to start with that. But then after that, it's pretty predictable because obviously the Margaret Qualley does not want to have to go to sleep because that's how it works. The one stays asleep while the other one lives, and then they alternate. And there's this entire process which we can get to, but um, the film makes a big deal about saying 7 days, no exceptions. So obviously we're waiting for her to break the rules. And what happens is that the longer Margaret Qualley stays past 7 days, it starts to make Demi get older. So we see like parts of her body get older until ultimately she's a really old, like decrepit thing. But
Crone.
yeah, But everything culminates in Margaret Qualley's character, Sue. She has become really popular and she's been tapped to host a New Year's Eve celebration, a la Ryan Seacrest. So she's like, well, I don't have time to go to sleep. So we see that 3 months have passed where she has not gone back to sleep. So you know Demi's going to be messed up. And she is. When we see Demi after those 3 months, she looks like something from The Witches.
Hmm.
But it's a problem because part of what keeps the younger version going during the 7 days is they have to extract what I'm assuming is cerebrospinal fluid and inject it in. Margaret has to inject it into her own body every day. But after 3 months of sucking Demi dry, on the night before New Year's Eve, she tries to extract some CSF and it comes out looking like dirty coffee water. So she calls the people who supply her with the substance, and she's called this number many times, her and Demi. And it's a man on the phone who I loved that portrayal because he's like, when he answers the phone, he's like, hey, yep, I know who it is. And all he does is reiterate the same rules. Like he doesn't have
Yep.
any. But at the very end, when Margaret's desperate, he goes, well, you have to let Demi wake up so that she can produce more fluid.
Your matrix has to recharge. Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, Margaret's like, this is the worst time. Like, I'm doing this big event. So she does wake up Demi, and then they have a final showdown, like a really brutal fight where Margaret almost kills Demi. She goes to the New Year's, like to the studio to film the show. But right before they're about to tape, Margaret starts falling apart, literally, which we'll get to. So she freaks out, runs back home. And then she has the bright idea. The activator, it says like you only use this one time and don't like single use, discard it. But of course, just like how people don't finish their antibiotics and keep them, she had kept the leftovers. So Margaret decides to inject herself with a partial dose. And of course, just like when you only take a partial course of antibiotics, it does not turn out well. So what ends up happening is she births a version of herself that's like a mutant, which you already referenced is like Henan Loter's brain damage.
Basket case.
Basket case.
He also did a film called Brain Damage. But that's where I get the Brian Usna Society, where there's the wall of bodies at the orgy at the end.
Yes, which we should describe what the mutant looks like. But the mutant is called Monstro Ellie Sue, so a combination of Elisabeth and Sue. And that horrific version of the two of them shows back up at the studio to film. And then this is where, I mean, the film's already kind of fantastic and absurd, but this is where I felt like the ending is like a dream, maybe, because this monster shows up and it becomes a literal bloodbath. And the monster basically explodes. The end.
Yeah, a bloodbath that equals the prom scene in Carrie.
Yep.
I would, and yeah, it's pure absurd grand guignol. I loved it.
Um, I thought this, so as I was walking out of the screening, the elevator was packed and like half the people didn't like it. And I was surprised, but then not really, because the people who said they didn't like it weren't very good looking. So I think that maybe, I think maybe they don't struggle with like their beauty fading. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I feel like, no, I thought it was very slick commentary on how horrific it can feel to lose the thing that for many people is like their calling card, you know?
Well, I think that's what, Demi Moore in this role. For years, there's always been those rumors about how she's obsessed with youth. And, remember that one cover of that W magazine where her thigh was
Altered.
cropped? So I think it's kind of a brave role for her to take.
It's the
And
perfect role for her.
I think I agree. And I think that you really pity her and feel for her, in that you realize she can't help herself. Because one time when she calls the hotline, he's like, well, you can just stop. And she said something like, I don't like myself.
Yeah, that moment really spoke to me, not personally, but like to this character. And I think Demi Moore is the perfect person to play it because she doesn't come across as this super vapid woman. I think that she's crafted a career based on her appearance, but that's not all she is. So even though we don't get a lot of depth in the writing of the character, I think the actor portraying her brought a lot of
Mhm.
depth to the character. So I really felt for her. Like this woman is holding on, like she's trying to hold on to a life and a career more than her beauty, but her beauty is so attached to it that it's almost like she has no choice. What would she be without it? Um,
Well, it's funny you were confused about the Oscar, because that kind of accolade doesn't even mean anything at a certain point. It's not, there's no cachet in that. It is how she looks. So on her 50th birthday, when is given the boot by a man named Harvey,
yeah.
who, by the way, Dennis Quaid was supposed to be Ray Liotta, but he died.
Um,
Yeah.
well, Dennis Quaid does a fine job. So actually, I wanted to go through, since this is body horror, like all the moments I thought were really gross, starting with the opening of the film, because we see an egg splitting, the visuals, the production design, the sound editing are so fantastic to me, like totally up my alley. But we see Elizabeth Sparkle's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame being installed. And then we see how over time it's starting to crack, not unlike her beauty, let's say. And the final, so we see like time pass. We do see snow, which is not really, I also like that it's not explained to us like the time and place we're in. So it's like an alternate reality, which I liked. And then we do see snow on the star, which wouldn't be very common in Hollywood, but we see it getting older and cracked. And then the final person to walk over her star, because it's an overhead view, is this man who drops his like cheeseburger on it. And the way he like tries to pick it up and clean it was so gross to me. And that's when I knew, like, oh, this is just a mere sample of what we're going to get.
Mhm.
Um, but gross, Dennis Quaid. The
Oh, so
character, ugh,
Army.
vile. We see him eating like crawfish and
Mhm.
just like him sucking out the meat, and then his teeth, like because he smokes, so all his teeth are he's just so gross in the way he behaves. And it's a perfect balance because he's not completely, because at first I thought he'd be a total like pervert. And he's not really, he's just an asshole who only cares about ratings and youth and beauty, even though he's like the opposite of those things. But he wasn't as inappropriate with Margaret as I expected him to be.
Sure, but you can see that there's the boundaries could be crossed quite easily. It's funny, the crawfish, because I just rewatched The Big Easy, where he has a very bad Nolans accent, and he's shouting at somebody about the sassafras on the crawfish etouffee.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the transformation. So the kit, I thought I was really intrigued. Like I know whomever designed the kit for the substance had a lot of fun because I would have really enjoyed, like if I would have been responsible to create that kit, because we see it's three parts. It's the activator, which is just the one vial, but the way it's all packaged and vacuum sealed, it looked really good. And then the second step is the activator, which is where you draw the CSF and then inject it into your body like an EpiPen. And then then there's the feeding portion. So then we have these like food packs. So actually there are four steps because you have to feed daily, you have to do the stabilizer daily, and then there's like a tube that connects the two bodies when you have to switch. And I thought that was all really well done. But when we see Demi do it the first time, she's in this like beautiful Can we talk about her apartment for a second? Wasn't that the coolest apartment?
It was fantastic, and I loved what they do with the space, especially in the
The hallway?
chase scene. the hallway. There's that chase scene. So shout out to the DP Benjamin Kracun, who did Promising Young Woman amongst many other things. But they made they turned that space out. They
Yeah.
very well utilized.
But she's in this big white sterile tile bathroom that looked really cool. It kind of made me think of the first Saw movie. If that bathroom, like when it was new, like the space that they're in, that's what this bathroom looked like. But anyway, the first time Demi takes it, she's totally nude. So we get a lot of nudity from both ladies. But it was a really cool image. And then when she falls and hits her head, it's just all so like it's also disturbing, but then we see that this thing is growing in her back, which is a callback to when Demi was in the hospital and the interesting young nurse, he's feeling her spine and she's like, "What exam is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just routine. You'd make a perfect candidate." And then
Mhm.
he goes, "I mean, you're perfectly fine." But of course, we know that he has something else planned. But then we see that her back splits open, like from the rooter to the tutor, and then you see Margaret Qualley crawl out of. It's very well done.
Mhm. I
Although
mean, absurd for sure, but I think
yeah,
that the quality of it is so good. It again, the callbacks to the films from the 80s that we keep referencing also had that same element of presenting it in a way that makes you believe that this is happening to this
yeah.
person, even though this couldn't.
So now that Margaret has gotten the job, Margaret's character Sue, she has a show to replace Demi's, and the show is called Pump It Up. I'm like, what kind of show is this? Because I mean, I do daily like guided workouts, and there's no way I could have kept up with Margaret. So I don't know who is doing her workouts in the morning. But at one point, she's filming, and we see that something like popped out of her butt, and everyone,
Yeah.
she freaks out, and then the production team was like, hold on, the director says they saw something. Can we rewind the tape? And everyone's all paranoid, like, what are we going to see? And Margaret freaks out and runs to the bathroom. And she starts like fiddling with her butt. And there is like a foreign object in there. And she pulls it out through her navel. And what is this object? A damn drumstick. So then we realize, okay, one thing that I was a little confused by is the people who provided the substance keep saying that you two are one.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if it's like cell division, then it's kind of like twins, right? So twins don't share the same brain, so they don't have the same thoughts. But then it did seem like Margaret knew. Were you confused by how much they understood about each other, or are they
I think
totally separate?
I think that it was a learning process for them both. I think because Demi has that binge eating scene where
That's
she's
what
doing
causes the drumstick to come out.
where she's doing that as punishment. Yeah.
But I was confused. How did Margaret know? Like she took to Demi's life like she had lived it before. So then and then they kept saying you are one. So then it was making me think, does Margaret have some of Demi's memories or, something that would help her live this life so, I
Yeah,
mean,
as in
seamless.
what is her consciousness?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Unlike
trying.
something like Poor Things, which also starred Quality recently, where there's this developmental stage that this new person has to go through. But again, to me, it's almost Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde
Sure.
as well, where it's the same person but a different facet of the personality.
Okay. When Margaret like New Year's Eve well, another gross moment is the fight scene between like when Elisabeth and Sue finally meet. It's very brutal, very bloody. There's a scene where Margaret is like smashing Demi's because at this point she looks like the thing from the witches. She's smashing her head into the bathroom mirror. The audience was groaning, which I loved. And then it also seems like they both have superhuman strength. And Margaret
Right.
kicks Demi like across the living room and like shatters her on this glass coffee table and kicks her until she's like bleeding to death. That was pretty extreme. Then when Margaret gets to the New Year's Eve event and she's ready to film, she starts coughing, goes to the bathroom, and starts losing teeth. And starts pulling teeth out, which is always funny to see someone smile with missing teeth. And then she gets in the elevator as if she would be able to really film this. And her ear falls off while she's in the elevator. So, of course, she runs home. And then we have to talk about the mutant. Can you describe what that mutant looked like?
I, it's pretty exceptional. I don't know.
Because earlier, when Margaret was auditioning for Demi's role, the casting people were like, oh, everything is where it should be. Like, because they criticized a different person who auditioned saying that her nose is too big. So then when we see the mutant looks like it has body parts everywhere. Like it has like teeth where the breast should be. And then the face, you can't, it's not recognizable, but on its back, you have Demi Moore's face in like a perpetual scream.
Yeah.
And then at one point, like a breast grows out of the eyeball of the mutant and like falls on the stage. That was pretty spectacular.
Which again, I think that this is something, this is body horror directed by a woman. And I think that you can tell at every moment, and I think it's fantastic.
Oh yeah. So the final bloodbath is the mutant, like I think their arm or what you would call an arm gets cut off. And so it starts spraying blood like a fire hydrant over this studio audience while they're all trying to attack her. At one point, someone like knocks the mutant's head off, like it explodes gratuitously, and then it just grows another one back. But ultimately, the mutant, Ellie Sue, is able to run out of the studio. She falls and explodes, but Demi Moore's face is still like intact and moving. And I think probably one of the more powerful images I've seen in a while is we see Demi Moore's face as this blob of flesh crawling away from the body, and it crawls over to her star on the Walk of Fame and places itself perfectly. And then we just see her smiling. And then, of course, it disintegrates and the movie ends. I thought that was pretty brilliant.
Really, like it's really depressing. I don't know. One that's kind of like the thing, her head, her face crawling away. But the thought that I had watching that when I saw it at Cannes was a line from Valley of the Dolls, which was Sparkle Lizzie Sparkle, because
Ugh.
that's her
I
name.
just I just want to get through a few notes. Um, Watching the first attempt at the activation and how messy it was and like extreme because they both sort of fall and hit their heads, I thought this is a lot of work for 7 days because like
Yeah,
they have to clean up and then also did I was laughing thinking that both women just leave the bodies like they
laying on the floor, like they
yeah,
don't
they don't even
care.
try to prop them up comfortably and put a pillow. Now,
Oh no.
at a point though, Margaret realizes that maybe she wants to have more of the life than Demi. So there's a scene where she does a full bathroom demo, which I thought was really funny. And then this is where we meet her neighbor, Oliver, who was this total creep. I thought the building she lived in was so interesting because she has like the best view that overlooks like the Hollywood Hills. But then when you look at the hallway to like her neighbors, it looks like she lives in a shitty apartment building. But then when they leave out the front, it looks like she lives in like a really cool, expensive area. It was so peculiar. When Demi goes to get the substance, the address they give her, it's funny because it's like this sketchy area and like a weird alley. And then she's given an access card that opens a door, but only like 2 feet up. So she has to crawl under and walk through this rat-infested hallway to get to this sterile space where she has a locker. And that's where she retrieves um, her package. But one time when she does that, she gets freaked out and runs to a cafe. And that's when we are introduced to the nurse, like that young man who was the nurse. His older self had followed Demi to the diner. And he's trying to
Mhm.
explain to her, like, this shit is for the birds. It's only going to get worse. I thought that was really interesting.
It's interesting. I think the process of her trying to get it is it's this demeaning thing that you have to stoop to a certain level to
Yes.
go into this subterranean part of yourself, really. But oh, going what I wanted to say about going back to the messy process, to me, that's like any kind of upkeep that you're doing that is not that uh, like if you're wearing a hairpiece on your head, for instance, that's glued there, or just the kind of the hair in general, the kind of upkeep that you have to do to maintain this vestige of something that is really quite superficial.
Yeah. I'm told pretty hurts. I would
Uh,
love,
My review that I wrote for Can, that is the opening line for my review.
oh, um, so I would love for nurses to comment if like once they see it, because the way Demi is expected to know how to like draw blood and like insert these needles to have like a line, and it's all so outrageous, but it's fun, and like her trying to like perform like a spinal tap, I guess. I thought that was very entertaining. Did you notice the robe that Margaret Qualley's wearing with the dragon on the back?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so exquisite. I love that. Um, when we see Demi Moore, the first time they pushed the 7 days and now she has this old finger, it made me think of Plain Jane and that song Burger Finger. Like that's what a
Oh.
burger finger might look like.
Can you imagine I mean, it starts out small with just the finger, but the horror of that moment where the
Oh,
damage to the body is irreparable.
yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, that's like people that gamble. It's like, I'm gonna cut myself off right here. I'm done.
That's the
That's it.
problem with addiction. But the when Demi calls the hotline and wants to cancel her subscription, I guess, she gets like the final box that's like meant to terminate her younger self, Margaret Qualley. But I like that on the like the insert, it says, "We're sorry you didn't appreciate your experience." um, I already mentioned this, but Demi, when we see her as the old, decrepit thing, it is so funny because she's very strong and fast. And just the visual. Oh, also, I should have added this to the gross segment. Dennis Quaid, as a going away gift or a parting gift, gave her a French cuisine cooking book and then cookbook. And we see all the recipes. And I mean, I'm sure these are gourmet dishes, but they didn't look very appetizing the way it was. And so there's a sequence where Demi is watching Margaret's new show, Pump It Up, and no, she's watching Margaret do like an interview on like a late night talk show. And she is getting so enraged that Margaret is not acknowledging that she's just basically part of Demi. And seeing Demi Moore in the old lady makeup with the gray hair, cooking, and all the sound editing of the squishing it was so perfectly gross to me.
And meanwhile, there's that billboard of Margaret Qualley right outside her window.
Oh, and then the moment, yes, that beautiful billboard of Margaret Qualley in this pink bathing suit, but then inside her apartment is this beautiful portrait of like peak Demi Moore that is just so stunning. And at one point, we get a shot where they're kind of facing each other. I thought that was beautiful. Um, I don't have anything negative to say except that I did feel like I was a little lost at a moment, understanding how much of Demi's consciousness Margaret had, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I felt a little sort of unstable for a second. Probably my biggest gripe is the film does feel long. It's two
So
hours, like 15 minutes. It's long.
most of the conversations I had at Cannes were people griping about that, but I think the payoff is, I'm again, if I'm enjoying it, the time doesn't matter to me.
Oh, I
So
agree. I agree.
like
Um,
there was no, it is long, especially for a genre film, but to me there was no dead space. And I don't know, like the how it ends with the music by Rafferty. Also, the score is fantastic. Who did the score
yeah.
for both and several other things we've watched. But I May Destroy You. I mean, I walked out of this. I was exhausted. It was a late night screening at Cannes, and I was exhilarated. Like I went straight back to my flat and stayed up to write. So I don't know. Like there, especially genre films that are English language. This is a French director that have any kind of components like that, and this is firing on all pistons, I think.
Yeah, fantastic work to everyone involved. I think Demi Moore deserves a lot of attention for this. And I don't think it's so much that it's like, oh, she's so brave because she looks fabulous. We see her nude,
Yeah,
and I'm assuming that is her body. She looks fabulous. Um, so I don't know that I would call it brave. I just think this is like perfect casting, and she gave like an amazing performance that's so fun. I definitely wouldn't call this old biddy horror, but you know, it kind of feels like that, but it's so good.
sure.
What would you give The Substance?
4.
I think it's excellent. I would give it 4 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.